Welcome to Ars Aequi, the podcast on all things law and technology. I'm Tima.
I'm Paul, and on this episode, Tech Against Gender-Based Violence. Welcome to this new series, welcome to this new episode of Ars Aequi. On this series, we want to talk about tech for good, so how technology and innovation can help us create a better society. We will talk to founders, we will talk to activists about these issues, and we hope to give you an interesting series of interviews.
So the first societal issue that we want to focus on is the issue of gender-based violence, or GBV. Gender-based violence essentially refers to violence against an individual based on their gender. This is all rooted in patriarchy and the unequal gendered society that we have. So because of this, women often find themselves being victims of gender-based violence perpetuated to them by men. So today we're going to be joined by two innovators who are creating technological solutions to the issue of gender-based violence. We're going to be chatting to Nkhanyiso and Moritz. And I think it's important to let everyone know that our intention today is not to center men at the middle of the conversation about female empowerment and gender-based violence. Instead, what we want to do is we want to highlight men who are actually being allies in the fight against gender-based violence and men who are using their privilege and their positions in society to create solutions that will help women. Because at the end of the day, we believe that the fight against gender-based violence is something that we all need to take part in, and something that we all need to get involved with. So of course, there are many women in this space doing incredible things, but today we really want to highlight our male allies and to show other men that they really can show up for women, and there's so many different ways to do so. So we hope you enjoy this episode and stay tuned for more on the Tech for Good series.
Today we're kicking off a very new series on Tech for Good. The idea of this series is that Paul and I will be interviewing and chatting to founders, innovators, entrepreneurs who are coming up with exciting and innovative solutions to economic, social, and political issues. So today we are joined by Nkanyiso and Moritz, who are going to be talking to us about their technological solutions that they've come up with to the issue of gender-based violence.
Hi, welcome. Why don't you start by introducing yourselves? Maybe Moritz, you start.
Hi, and thanks for having us. So together with 5 others, a bit more than a year ago, we did create a tool that is called Dickstinction, and it's available under dickstinction.com. And we say it's an easy tool to fight dick pics. So the idea is that you can go on this website and really easily, within 1 minute, create a criminal complaint that you can then send to the police. And well, it just makes it easier and lowers the barrier to take action against dick pics on social media. And it all started as part of a hackathon in the legal tech space. So it was a conference, you had these 24 hours to build the tool. And we're together with a team of 5 others. This was what we came up with. And then throughout the course of last year, we got a lot of traffic for that on social media. And we just sort of continue this as a project that we do in our free time.
So Moritz, can you tell us a little bit why you decided to go the route of creating a solution to unsolicited dick pics? Was there a specific reason for this, or was it just kind of like something that came up as part of the hackathon?
Well, obviously those hackathons always have topics, and one of them was like access to justice as a main topic, which is very common in the legal space, where it's always about just making already existing rights more accessible. And so dick pics was one of the things where we said, okay, it's obviously punishable as a criminal complaint, but nobody's doing anything about it. And with the help of tech, you could just lower this barrier. And this is sort of where we got started. And then from there, we just tried to design something that was easy to use and accessible.
Thank you. And Nkanyiso, your company, eMfundi, has come up with a solution in this area of gender-based violence as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the smart nail and what technology it uses and exactly why you guys decided to launch this product?
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me and my team here. So essentially, eMfundi is founded by a group of entrepreneurs, and when we started the company, we thought, how can we create more entrepreneurs in Africa, and how can we move Africa forward economically, socially, and technologically? So obviously, in terms of our base, most of our users are female identifying, and they're based in Africa. And we started hearing a lot of noise in terms of GBV, and GBV is very big in South Africa. So we just thought, how could we potentially offer our current clientele something to make them feel safe and comfortable? So we decided to launch our series of technologies, which we call Future Fit Technologies. And our first product was the Smart Nail. So it's a radio inductive chip. For all the geeky oaks, it's an NTAG 213 kind of chip. So it uses like the latest IoT technologies. So there's, just besides the SOS services that we promote, also the location services, and also the virtual call. So it's almost, if you can imagine, like a remote to your phone to quickly activate these prompts. It also has other online features. So the whole idea that when we built the company is how to create more entrepreneurs, but more future fit entrepreneurs. And it just happened that most of our subscribers on our platform are women. So we really thought, like, how can we create a technology right now that will be of good use to our client base, but also get people more involved and more willing to learn more about technology in South Africa. So that is the genesis of the Smart Nail N3 chip.
And how exactly does it work? So when this is a fingernail, so we maybe have to explain this a bit, how this works in detail.
So it uses the NFC technology. NFC is like, it's a small range, about 4 to 5 meters. And essentially what it does is that you put the nail on your chip, and then we also give you like aesthetic nails, like a plastic nail to cover it. Then you coat a layer. And essentially what you're going to do is that we also have an app and a lot of partner apps where we have to program the prompts. So right now the chip has 5 prompts. So currently the most active or the most useful prompts are the SOS. So when you have let's say SOS situation and you don't want to reach your phone, what you'll do is that you'll tap, depending on the Android or iPhone, a part of the back of your phone, and it will send the prompt out to the listed contacts. Then we also have the location services. So obviously if your phone's on and you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable and you would like to let, a friend, like almost like now you get on an Uber and you share your location, you also can tap that prompt as well. And then we also have a virtual call. So essentially what you have to do is that you can receive the chip, and then you have to pre-prompt it with an app. And then when the nail touches the back of the phone, and then we'll know which prompt to activate and send out. So we launched it literally at the beginning of this month. We've received quite a bit of reception, and we always trying to constantly improve and see what works, what doesn't work, but we had no idea it was gonna take off like this.
I mean, that was my next question, right? So how has the reception been? And has it been a gendered reception? Do you feel that more women are more excited about these products as opposed to men? Or do you feel like it's quite a balance?
Yeah, in South Africa, definitely more women. Literally, we keep getting DMs, even when we go out, people like, we really love this tech. Unfortunately, with the iPhone 10 and iPhone 11 or iPhone 12, those are only ones that have NFC compatibility on their phones. So everyone with the iPhone 9, 8, and 7, they've definitely given us a chip on the shoulder, and that's something we definitely will improve. But also we do have a lot of conscious men that understand the situation, and they might buy for their sister or their girlfriend. And then, yeah, it's literally, it's flower off the shelf. We weren't ready for this kind of demand.
And I mean, in the context of South Africa, like you've said, gender-based violence is a huge issue. And I mean, we've seen the protests that have happened since 2019 and the things that have been going on in governments trying to get involved and really look into the issue and make some sort of regulatory changes. Do you believe that this smart nail is going to really impact that space? Or do you feel like it's going to be something that will assist a little bit, but not essentially make many changes? And what changes do you think your company needs to implement to get closer to the kind of South Africa that we want? That might be a big question.
No, it's a good question. It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I think I'll answer this in two parts. I think the first part is, I think GBV in South Africa and in some places is quite systemic, especially here in South Africa. So I don't think that the nail will change that systemic issue, but I do think it will allow more people to let their other partners know that I am safe, or please come and help me. And I think in terms of in society right now, especially in South Africa, there's a lot of negative feeling towards the law enforcement or towards the police in terms of their reaction. And so it's a bit difficult, you know, because how is a policeman supposed to know when this is happening at that time? And I think what the nail chip does, it gives that instant access of information to the partner or to the police and say, I'm here, I'm under threat. In terms of our company and how we approach, obviously, like I said before, our whole literally culture inside eMfundi is how do we move Africa forward and socially, economically, and technologically. And so obviously we do understand there are certain systemic problems. So we do have a platform called Nest. And essentially what we want to use Nest is to basically upskill women in South Africa, teach them about wealth creation, then also teach them about all these technologies and give them a way out. Because I really do feel like the best way to equip a woman in South Africa is to give her all the knowledge and all the resources, and hopefully that will force the community in South Africa to be like, okay, we're taking this group of individual very seriously, and we hope we will not be the end goal, but almost like a bridge, and we hopefully we can walk that path with all the women in South Africa and all the men as well.
I mean, I definitely agree. There's that saying that says, when you educate or empower a woman, you empower an entire generation, because there's kind of a trickle-down effect, because obviously the women raise the children and things like that. So I think that's great that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, maybe switching back and comparing this to Dickstinction, this is really a project that was created for a problem that has been caused by the internet. So unlike the smart nail, which is a societal problem that exists and technology now solves it, we have kind of created a problem with dick pics, and are now trying to solve it as well with by using technology. I think it was quite interesting because in Germany, sending unsolicited dick pics is a criminal offense. It isn't, for example, in Austria. But I think this law has been around for longer, so this wasn't the case for dick pics especially, right?
Yeah, I think actually both of our projects have something in common, and I was really amazing project. I just heard about the smart nail for the first time, just wow, and which is about not necessarily pointing towards the laws that exist that already in many cases protect us from gender-based violence in a certain sense, but it's more than that about creating awareness. Like if I just imagine like how many men are just not aware of women going out with this like constant fear, and something like the smart nail, when you say that, I don't know, brothers buy it for their sisters, like this just creates an amazing effect that people just come to realize like that's a daily fear that you face. And 100%. with Dickstinction, it was very much the same, that all of a sudden like some of the public prosecutors called us and said like, look, we're getting so many criminal complaints, we have to find a way to deal with that, because we weren't aware that so many dick pics are actually being sent. And I think this is what both projects have in common, that it's much more about creating awareness than, of course, it's also about prosecution and the immediate effect. but it's much more about like just showing that the problem is there.
Yeah, so Moritz, how has Dickstinction been received in Germany, given the fact that you guys are working closely with law enforcement and creating a complaint sheet specifically for law enforcement? How has this been received, and do you feel like the reception has been gendered in any way?
Well, in terms of the audience, of course, we've gotten many messages. I think more than 90% of the complaints, we're not saving any data, so we're being very careful with that. So we don't really know if who is sending out the complaints, but from the response that we've received on social media so far, it's been, I would say, the huge majority women. And in terms of the response from law enforcement and social media, it was, we get the attention comes in waves. So whenever there's, I don't know, a certain influencer who posts our tool, who reports about it, who tells her audience about it, we see that in traffic numbers and in the messages we get. And yeah, law enforcement, they have been contacting us, but more in terms of like, look, we're getting so much work, what can we do about it? Not necessarily in terms of like, I don't know, how can we prevent that?
I mean, it is interesting how this is dealt with in Germany, in my opinion. And I would say that this is to be expected, and we see this with legal tech solutions as well, that for example, for these flight rights, so passenger rights for flights, for example, which is another kind of legal tech tool that is often mentioned. And we see the same effect, that courts are just overwhelmed by the actual illegal stuff that is happening, but it's just not being prosecuted. So I think that even showing this and providing access to justice is really helping this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And on the topic of law, Nkanyiso, how do you feel that your company is adhering to data protection restrictions and requirements? I mean, of course, you guys are processing vast amounts of personal data, people's location data, things like that. And although it's for a good cause, how do you feel like you guys have had to balance that with adhering with the regulation, and specifically the Protection of Personal Information Act?
Yeah. So I'm not too sure if you guys know. So in South Africa, we have the POPI rule. So it's the Protection of Personal Information Act. Yeah. So that just recently got signed in. So obviously we had to be compliant, and there's 8 steps. So we're in the process of completing those steps. But like Moritz just said, we're also very careful in terms of the partners that we use, because like I said, we have partners who have the app that allow you to do the prompts, and they also have to be vetted and vetted in different countries, because the smart nail we did create it here in South Africa, and we do want to push it here, but obviously we want to scale it, and then obviously we have to consider things like GDPR and all the different stuff. So we've been taking the slow walk with our partners, making sure that before we launch in those environments, we have everything legal and sorted out. But from a South African perspective, it's been going very well. It's been going very legal and very slow. But I think more importantly for us is how can we provide the impact right now without sacrificing someone's personal information, and making sure that, okay, when can we do this? So we haven't had the biggest launch here in South Africa because of that, but we've also just wanted to, we've seen the reception, and we want to walk, because imagine if that information gets in the wrong hands, we might be creating a bigger problem in GBV, because then that's something like Uber drivers. I don't know if you also heard about what's happening with Taxify and Bolt, and how people pretend they're Uber drivers and then take girls home. So that is something that we have been speaking and spending a lot of time and understanding, but we are taking the legal requirements that's required in South Africa, which is the POPI Act.
So based on this conversation about compliance, given that the Personal Protection of Personal Information Act recently just launched. Do you feel, especially in the African context, right? Do you feel like the increase of regulation in this area is stifling innovation for us in Africa, especially as people are really trying to create solutions to unique African issues? Do you feel like more regulation is impeding this, or do you feel like it's actually helping you guys in creating your products and marketing them for data protection and things like that?
Just to give you some context, I think everything in the world first happens around the world, then it happens in Africa. So
Facts.
I think in terms of the legal infrastructure, I think we are quite behind. In fact, I think the POPI Act should have been made long ago, because I don't know how many times I've received a phone call and I just wonder, how did this person get my number, and vice versa, So I don't think Africa's at the stage where regulation can stifle innovation right now. But I am worried that maybe, let's say now your Googles and all the big tech companies from around the world might use that as an advantage here, So I would say basically, I think we could be moving at a little bit of a quicker pace in terms of regulation, but also I do understand in terms of our government and in terms of the African infrastructure, they first have to conceptualize the technology before they make regulations, and then for instance, like in Kenya, with how they have drones delivering goods and stuff like that, they have to catch up. And then when you come to South Africa, where, if you want to fly a drone here, there's like something like a $20,000 licensing fee and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, there's no standard, for the continent. And then it's very different based on resources, what country can put it in terms of regulation. And then in some places, I think based on there, you might see a lot of innovation that goes unchecked. But in some other cases, you might see some heavy lockdown, like the situation I just made in terms of Kenya and South Africa when it comes to drone piloting, So it's a complex world, but I think we are moving in the right direction in Africa.
I agree. I do think in the context of Africa, we are moving in the right direction. My concern comes in with copy and paste regulation, which is often what we see that happens on the continent. So because we are developing at a slightly slower pace than perhaps the rest of the world, and we're regulating at a slightly slower pace, often what I find is that regulation is copied from other parts of the world and then kind of pasted and expected to work in the African context without much thought to what we actually need in Africa and how we should regulate for ourselves and create unique opportunities and situations for our own populations. So I think it's good that you're not finding it that it's impeding you. And I just hope that it doesn't get to this point with more copy and paste regulation.
Yeah, just on that, I don't even think it's only regulation. I also think in terms of how we incubate innovation in Africa is a lot of copy and paste. So for instance, like the normal standard model, you think, okay, cool, someone comes with a great idea, they meet co-founders, then they put in the incubator to learn business development, finance, and they go through a series of, investors, and then hopefully this innovation comes out to the world. But the African market doesn't work like that. But you'll see, like, we have a lot of incubators that act that way. And even the markets in terms of how they interact with our products. Like I said, like our users, for instance, like we are a technology company, but most of our users don't really care about technology. They just love the fact that it's African based, and they love, the brand. And then we slowly walking the journey and teaching them like the evolution of technology, but making it more Africanized, But now, how does that fit into an incubator? And then now, if you copy and pasting the incubating rules and standards, you're obviously gonna copy and paste the regulation as well, because you're just doing what works. It's not really like a base that's fermenting and forming itself and using internal. So I think what I really think Africa needs is a lot of local thought leaders and a local suppliers of information and knowledge and capital. And then I think that will help the speed of integrating and making sure we have the right policies that work effectively for the region and not just copy and pasting things.
I totally agree. Moritz, do you find this similar situation in Germany, that regulation is stifling innovation, or do you find that it kind of works hand in hand?
I think it's in Europe, we have a bit of a particularity because we have certain things that are regulated on a European level, such as the GDPR.
Mm-hmm.
But then, for example, with dickpics, we clearly see that they are punishable in one country, and then even if you just go to Austria, we could just use the exact same page. It's not punishable. And in Switzerland, we just got the message that there's now a sort of an extinction for Switzerland. And so even within such a small range, you can have so many different legislations. And so also, like, taking this on a sort of more global level, I think it's really, especially if you have smaller projects, sort of a more organic approach to growth and not taking, I don't know, European or US models, but really seeing, okay, that works locally, that works for, I don't know, that might be a South African approach, or that might be a Kenyan approach. That really helps also for projects, especially when they're not 100% commercially orientated, such as is often the case with gender-based violence. Of course, we get models that are much deeper rooted in the communities, that have a much bigger acceptance there. So I think especially for those projects, it's very important to also embrace this locality, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan on expanding Dickstinction to other countries if the law is possible?
Good question. So really, it's if we would have the time and not be all in our normal jobs, of course, we would definitely do it. But then, as I'm just a German lawyer and not a Swiss or Italian, we just saw that somebody launched it in Switzerland. We're super happy about it, and we're also happy to help everybody who wants to do it somewhere else. But we don't have the capacities now, unfortunately.
And Nkanyiso, we're seeing now that African startups and African innovators are really getting a lot of attention. They're getting a lot of investment and things like that. So what do you think about what's happening in the space with African startups and African technology? And what are your hopes for us as a continent moving forward?
I think there's a lot of upside. I think a lot of the infrastructure that we've been lacking is slowly going to come in, and this is in terms of the internet. I think a lot of people in terms of the continent, there's a lot of young people, so a lot of ambitious people, and I don't know, maybe I'd say unfortunately or maybe fortunately, the unemployment rate is also up. So I think people are forced to be innovative right now. So I think the fact that there's global appetite to find good ideas in Africa, I think that's going to be good for everybody, not just Africa, but I also just think globally, because I think globally we need Africa to come to the party in terms of innovation and technology, and I think everyone wants to see that. So I am very excited. I'm very much involved in terms of the community, and I definitely would want to expand. So I think I think Africa has the potential to shock the world, but I think it's up to the world to believe in Africa with their money, with their time, with their resources and skills like that. And I think the way the world's moving, it's literally taking out the middleman. It's making distances shorter. It's really allowing the small guys to play. And if you think about Africa, I mean, there's a lot of small guys. There's a lot of one thing like the impact of technology in Africa it's high anywhere else in the world. You know, you can have, I know you look at M-Pesa, you always hear these stories about like these local guys that shouldn't have done it, do something, and then they reach amazing scale because they're solving one problem which is affected in Africa. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. What I think we need to do is that we need to have faith, and we need to be smart to find out which opportunities are worth our time and worth the reputation. And I think as time goes on, like Facebook, Google, everyone's making their way here because they need more users, you know, and they need to understand like how can we fully scale. And then I think that's where the younger communities and the incubators and the startups, the entrepreneurs, we need to be visible and we need to take opportunities like that. And I think Africa will be in a good place if we do that.
I totally agree. And what makes me super excited about tech in Africa and the way things are going is that we have these really unique issues, and a solution in Africa, which might be convenience somewhere else in the world, really has such a massive impact and has the possibility to change lives, change circumstances and things like that. So I think it's incredible when I talk to African founders and African innovators, it's incredible to see what you guys are doing, because it's not an easy space to get into in the continent because there are so many structural and infrastructure limitations and things like that. But I think it's amazing to see how, like, just how Africans are doing it. Like, I love to see it. I really do love to see it. But I have one question. There's often a conversation about innovators and founders from outside of the continent coming into the continent and coming up with solutions or bringing their ideas and products and things into the continent. And essentially, there's an article that I read where they described it as sucking up investment and taking investment away from African founders. So what do you think about this? And do you feel like this is an issue, or do you think it's something where Africans and the people that come onto the continent can work together?
If I'm really honest, I think that's not just an African problem. I think that's a problem around the world. It's always, business is half part about your technical solution, but to be real, business is also about who you know and how you leverage your relationships. So I do think it could be, look, there's two takes on this. One, that yes, that article does make a good suggestion that they're taking up funding, but also I think there's a great opportunity for cross-pollination of ideas and capital, you know? So I do think that maybe if in Africa, if the angel investors, the incubators, maybe had a low, let's say 70-30 split in terms of, is this a local funded person? In South Africa, we have this thing called BEE, or Black Empowerment. I forgot the last year.
Black Economic Empowerment.
Yeah. And I like that model where they say, okay, cool, these are the certain targets that you need to have to receive funding from the states, you know? And I think that is something that we can take forward. But I also do not want us to not close away, you know, the international and the foreigners, because they bring ideas. And like I said, like for instance, there are many ideas that I've looked around the continent and I've just said, hey, this would work in South Africa. And I think vice versa. What we need to make sure is that everyone's benefiting, and more locals than foreigners in the country. And I think that's going to be more, I think that is where Africa needs to spend most of its time. And that is, I think, has a history that it really hasn't taken enough time to work with that legislation. Like, how do we not lose our assets that easily? So I think this could be something that potentially could happen, but I think frameworks like the BEE could be something that we can take forward and apply in different funding spaces around the continent.
Moritz, do you have any comments on this concept of cross-pollination?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's super interesting because in my sort of professional life, I've been working a lot with agriculture developments in that, and it's really sort of sustainable agriculture in South America, and very much there we see the same thing, that if a movement or foundation is locally rooted, then of course there can be outside influence that helps grow, that helps accelerate. But it's very important that the ideas are locally rooted and that they also respect certain local conditions, certain local formalities, and you just see that movements that that have local roots are so much stronger, because they're not just somebody coming and saying, look, that's a new thing, But and so I love hearing this conversation and just hearing how much potential there is and the number of ideas. So yeah, I mean, in Europe we already have quite a general culture of exchange in that sense, but it's very nice to hear that this is happening also in Africa, hopefully.
I mean, it's even interesting that all these problems you wouldn't really know if you aren't really into a culture and haven't experienced them yourselves. So from the outside perspective, you may not even have the idea, or you may just not get it right. And like completely miss the obvious solution, for example.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why I'm a big advocate for Africans creating solutions for Africa, because I feel like we understand our context the best, we understand our history, and our history is very loaded and it comes with a lot, you know? So I feel like we need to empower ourselves to make solutions for ourselves, which is why I love to talk to people like Nkanyiso and William, who are really doing it and who are making impacts. Okay, so let's bring it back to gender-based violence. Some people might be watching this or listening to this and thinking, okay, so they're discussing gender-based violence and female empowerment, and there's 3 men and there's 1 girl, right? So what do you guys think is the role of men in this space? Because in my opinion, I think it's really important that we have men who are allies and who are in rooms that women might not necessarily have access to, or in the numbers that they should, and who advocate for us and who create solutions to help us all, because we need to understand that gender-based violence is something that impacts the entire community as a whole. So what do you guys think is the importance of men creating solutions for violence perpetuated against women by men?
I guess I'll start off. So I think the first thing that I think all men have to do, I think we need to listen. I think we are in this position because maybe we haven't been listening. And I think that's going to be a first place to start, is listening. And then the second part, I think, is having conversation about it. I think GBV is a very complicated thing, because especially in South Africa, and there's different roles and different reasons for it. But I think what's very important, that I think both genders need to be in the same room and they need to communicate. And I think as men, we need to listen first before we speak, and then add our 2 cents. And then from there, I think then we can start talking about the structural things, like how should we have platforms? Again, I mean, I'm giving my government so much props for this, but going back to the BE, they have this thing of women empowerment, and they have like strict laws, like 51% women ownership. This is what you do for this long and that. And I think that is a real format and whole basis, because the thing is, we have to tell the story and see it for what it is. And the truth of the matter is that women and, you know, Black women in South Africa, they've been disadvantaged, you know, and they've been crying the same tune. And as you've seen, we year after year, we keep having we need to solve that. And I think we need to, as men, understand that this is a real systemic issue. This is as bad as racism. This is as bad as poverty. How do we first acknowledge that? Then we listen. Then how do we put platforms in running a company? Make sure that these are the policies. You know, I think as much as we check GDPR and policy, I think every institution in South Africa at least needs to have like a sexual harassment policy and all that kind of stuff. Those structures in the beginning, it mustn't be an afterthought. It mustn't be a thing where, okay, cool, now to hit the score, I need to have women in the room, or to sell this product, I need women in the room, you know? Like I said, even to be quite frankly honest with you guys, like we are, you know, a bunch of male founders. We had 1 lady founder, you know, and I think if our clients, if our customer base wasn't women, I think we might have not made the smart mail chip, you know. It was only through that what do our customers want? Who are they? Where are they based? What's the biggest problem right now? You see, it took a lot of in-depth soul searching from our side to understand what does our customer want. And it happened to be that they were women, it was GBV, and it's like small nail made sense. But if I didn't have that, or if any of the founders didn't have that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I think listening is the biggest part. And also, how do we make women feel more comfortable, in these spaces? It's, sometimes women don't want to talk to men about GBV and the issues because we're the trauma creators, And now we need to understand, like, how do we create a safe environment, a protected environment? And I think a big thing is an environment that ladies can trust. If something happens, that they know, the infrastructure and the legislation will protect them. And I think that will open up the basis, and then I think we can get all smart and get PhDs in the room, and they'll come up with things to. But I think the basis of it is we have to start listening. We have to start communicating together, and we have to really rely on legislation and things like the BEE, but in a more GBV focused way. And I think that'll be a platform for success.
Moritz, same question to you.
Well, there's really not much I want to add to this because, I think I see my role like as a man. Usually you would be speaking to Bianca, my wonderful co-founder, because I think it is more powerful if women can explain the problematic situation and how we tackle it. So I try to keep my own voice out of this. And then what we can do is raise awareness, and then have tools like Dickstinction empower women to act on their own. And that's it.
No, that's great. And I think as the only woman here, I would say that it's important, like I've said before, to have male allies, because the struggle of trying to have men understand what it feels like to be a woman in this world and to navigate the world as a Black woman, especially, to constantly have to try to explain that to people is difficult. And when you have men who understand it and who are already in a position where they can do something about it and are doing something about it, it's so much easier, because then you guys can take that understanding and the knowledge that you've gained back to your circles, back to your friends and your families. And I think that's the way that we affect grassroots change, you know what I mean? Because we can have legislation and have policies in place, but that's at the top. And often from policy to trickle down to the everyday man, that takes years, and that takes a lot of time and implementation and things like that. So I think when we have guys like you who are in positions and they're doing things like this and having these type of conversations without centering yourselves at the center of the conversation, I think it's an impactful thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so both of you, what are your plans for the future with both of your businesses, the things that you're doing, any new products coming up, things we should look out for?
On our side, there's, of course, we always say that if it works really well for us, then we will sort of get rid of ourselves, because if it works really well, we will have a lot of criminal complaints, and everybody who now thinks he can send a dick pic and just go unpunished will know that this is not going to happen again. And I think something like 90% of the dick pics will disappear if it's clear that you're getting a criminal complaint and the police is going to be in front of your door and you're getting a punishment. And so basically it's promoting that, and some technicalities where we want to make it easier. You have to imagine we're still sending out paper letters to the authorities. That's in 2021, that just seems ridiculous. But so far, it's the best and most effective and privacy-savvy way of getting these complaints out. So yeah, we obviously want to improve that. But much more than that, yeah, we're not a company. We're doing this free time. So we just hope to get an audience for it, and that everybody knows it. And you just know, if you get a dick pic, that's the thing to do. And just, yeah, empower people to use it.
On our side, we definitely gonna try and fill the demand here in South Africa and in Africa and globally in terms of the smart nail chip. So we really just focus on ramping and making sure that the product meets the market. But I think from a personal level as well is that we've got a series of technology. We're really big on this term called future fitness. And we believe that every African needs to be future fit. So we're literally spending our time developing, prototyping a range of future fit technologies that we want to introduce. And then on the second part, we have a platform called nest.eMfundi.com. And essentially that is our on-demand learning network. And essentially that is where you go when you want to learn future fitness. And as I told you before, our approach to technology is not, okay, what do we learn in school? What's everyone else doing? And let's dump it in South Africa and Africa. It's literally, do we understand the environment? What are the challenges? What's the possibility? And then how do we evolve our users to become more future fit? How do we gain? So the smart nail chip will start, they'll enjoy the benefits of it in terms of safety and GBV, but that's also introduction into understanding IoT, understanding technology where they would be interested, be honest, in terms of our user base. But once we show them the technology is friendly, it's something that it's not just for people outside, but for, a Black woman who really wants to, be future fit. And that is something that I'll be really excited about. If I can just have some Nest, the platform growing widespread in Africa and globally, and then also just increasing our range in terms of our future fit products. Would definitely love to have a smart ring and other cool tech to, just to help people get future fit.
Thank you, Nkanyiso and Moritz, for joining us, and thank you for having such an open and honest and impactful conversation. It was really a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Also to our listeners, we hope you stay tuned to Ars Aequi and listen to the other episodes of the Tech for Good series. We have some really interesting guests coming up.